Hey, what's up, everybody? We got a jam-packed show for you here tonight on Quincy Carrier Live. We're going to talk about the Cavs. We're going to talk about a lot of what's going on with the Cleveland Browns, the recent quotes coming from Jedrick Wills that admittedly has me a little concerned about him and his future with this team. I got to go see Cam Ward this weekend, a top quarterback prospect in this year's draft. I'll tell you my thoughts on that in just a minute here. Kevin and Andrew Berry's job security. Also going to talk about my 4 favorite draft prospects, or the prospects that fascinate me the most in 2025. We're going to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're going to talk about the Browns. We're going to talk about it all here today on the show. So give me a moment here as we get into the first topic of today, which is the Jameis Winston experiments. A lot of us have an idea of what the Jameis Winston experience was going to be coming into this. Some of us has had no idea what this Jameis Winston experience would be. The Jameis Winston experience, not too dissimilar to what we saw from the Joe Flacco experience this weekend, right? Joe Flacco starts for Anthony Richardson this week. He throws 3 interceptions, a touchdown, kind of like how Jameis threw 3 interceptions, a touchdown. Here is the key with the Jameis Winston experience, and this is where we failed with the Joe Flacco experience. Jameis is going to give you some incredible outings as a quarterback. It's important that you don't get carried away when he does that. The same is true for the opposite end of the spectrum. Jameis is going to throw a few interceptions, more than a few interceptions. He's going to make decisions that make you wonder why he would ever think to do that. It's important not to overreact. Jameis Winston is not as good as you think Jameis Winston is, and he's not as bad as you think Jameis Winston is. He is Schrodinger's quarterback, which is to say, Jameis is Jameis. And if you start talking about him being anything more than a bridge quarterback, well, then you're going to talk yourself into a ton of problems. That's just what the experience is. Got to remember to not get too carried away. But this week's going to be interesting because we got 2 things going on in this game. One, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Jared Goff, it was the first quarterback last Sunday to throw 5 interceptions in a game since Jameis Winston did it in 2019, which makes me feel like this might be a hold my beer Jameis game where he tries to, get his record back. But also, this is a legitimate Jameis Winston revenge game this week. He's playing New Orleans in New Orleans, the place where he was supposed to get a starting opportunity. He got injured. He never got that opportunity. They decided to go with Derek Carr over him. Jameis Winston gets to go up against Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints, who are fresh off a win against their heated rival, the Atlanta Falcons, in New Orleans. I'm going to tell you this right now. It would not surprise me if Jameis Winston threw 4 interceptions in this game. I will also say this. It would not surprise me if Jameis Winston threw 4 touchdowns in this game. It wouldn't surprise me if he threw 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in this game at the same time. Anything is on the table this week, man. I'm kind of excited to see what he does. I think a lot of people, because he had the bad performance, right? And again, people did the thing with Jameis where he plays well, but then people put too much on it because he is a former number 1 overall pick. And he was somebody who was seen as a generational prospect. And you kind of forget about everything else that's led Jameis to this point. And you put too many expectations on him, right? Jameis Winston beat the Baltimore Ravens his first game as a starter, and people thought the Browns were going to go undefeated for the rest of the year. That was never on the table for Jameis Winston. But what Jameis can do is play really well against the New Orleans Saints, a team that's struggling. Last week was not a great week for the Browns offense, but also I think they went up against the best defense that they're going to play all season last week. So it would stand to say that the offense would struggle a little bit. That being said, I think Jameis Winston this week, it's going to be a fascinating watch. It's going to be a fascinating watch. And I'm just interested to see where people take it, right? Because I feel like we've learned our lessons from all of this. You can't get too high with Jameis. You can't get too low with Jameis. You just got to kind of ride the wave of Jameis Winston, however you ride it. And again, that's kind of how it goes for the quarterbacks like him, right? The gunslingers. Baker Mayfield, right? He had a hot start to the year. They're 4-6 right now. Joe Flacco, right? Hot start to the year. They're struggling as well. He's not a part of the solution. Jameis Winston, hot start. Not a hot second game. We'll see what the third game is. You just got to take what you can get from those guys. But let's talk about Jedrick Wills for a second. I don't know how many people have gotten this article or gotten to read this article, but it's an interesting article written by Mary Kay Cabot of Cleveland.com about Jedrick Wills and his mindset about where he is with this team. Now, the big headline on this article is that Jed reveals that he made a business decision not to face the Baltimore Ravens because he was hurt. Now, that's going to be the part of this article that gets a lot of people clicking on it because that's the most salacious quote in the argument, in the article. You know, when players say they make a business decision, that's a taboo phrase in the NFL. It usually means that you're not choosing to play hard. And for a player like Jedrick Wills, whose number one complaint from the fan base has been that they don't feel like he plays hard enough, it's a damning thing to say. But that's not what made me mad when I read this article. He's making a business decision. Okay, it's a headline. It's meant to be salacious. It's meant to piss you off. I'm not going to really take that part too seriously. It's the quotes that I read when I got into the article, right? It's the tone of the quotes from Jedrick Wills when asked about why he's in the position that he's in. Yeah, he made a business decision not to play when he was somewhat injured against Baltimore. I can understand that on an individual level. But when they asked Jedrick Wills why he got benched and if he's upset about being benched, and he answers, and I quote, "I think upset isn't a good word to use." He said, "I would say it's more frustrating. I mean, it's not my decision. I can only do what I can do." I'll say the quote again to see if you catch to what makes me upset about that. I think upset, and again, this is in reaction to getting benched for poor play, presumably. I think upset isn't a good word to use, he said. I would say it's more frustrating, but I mean, it's not my decision. I can only do what I can do. Is not playing better in the purview of doing what you can do, Jedrick? That whole article, yeah, there's the business decision quote in there. Okay, people make a big deal out of that. You know, I don't really care. The issue that I have in there is the fact that Jedrick Wills has not put himself in the position to allow himself to be accountable for how he's played. Not one part in that article is he talking about, hey, I have to play better. I did not make the progression and the progress that I think I wanted to. I did not get to where I wanted to as a tackle. It's all, well, I got injured. Well, you know, it's not my fault. It's not my decision. it's real nonchalant, all shucks about being benched by a right tackle who's not even playing well this season in his second year. And you are a former top 10 overall pick. It's just pretty passive from Jedrick Wills. That is the part of that article that pisses me off, because the business decision quotes, those kind of quotes always get taken out of context and used to make fans angry all the time. I've seen that play done too many times to sit here and get angry over the two words business decision. He didn't want to play versus Baltimore because he didn't think it was in his best interest to play for whatever reason. I can't be too critical of that. I think Baker Mayfield's career would be much better if he decided to take a business decision and not play for the remainder of the 2021 season. I mean, you deciding you don't want to play because you don't think you can help the team, that I don't find is a bad thing. But when you get benched, not like you're injured, they put somebody over you, outright benched in a situation where you shouldn't have gotten benched, and you've got nothing to do but point fingers at people. That's loser behavior. Not calling Jed a loser personally, but I am calling out that behavior as loser behavior. What else am I supposed to do with that? Where is the competitive aggression? Where is the tenacity? Where is the work ethic? The will to be better? The self-awareness to improve? Jedrick Wills has not progressed since year one in his NFL career. He's actually regressed. He's unaware of this. This is what this article is telling me. He's not even aware of the fact that he's not good anymore. Everything that he's ever struggled with, according to him, has to do with injury. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. That is what I don't like about that article. Let's talk about some draft picks. Because it's the bye week, got the opportunity to go down to watch Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami, play against Georgia Tech. Now, obviously, if you paid attention to the results of this weekend, you would know that Miami got upset by Georgia Tech. So I chose a hell of a day to go down there and see Cam Ward. Now, the reason I wanted to go watch Cam Ward as opposed to any other quarterback that I'm close enough to go see, right? I could go to Tuscaloosa. Well, they played in Baton Rouge this weekend, so couldn't really go see Alabama. The reason I wanted to go see Cam Ward, one, it was the easiest place to go. And two, Cam Ward is the exact type of player that the broadcast view doesn't help you figure out if he's good or not, right? You watch Cam Ward on television, he's going to look amazing. Because on television, you're not seeing what's there that he could have just made before making some incredible play. Like, Cam Ward is a player made for the highlight reels. He does highlight reel stuff. He will make the most spectacular plays of the weekend in college football. He is the best show in college football. Nobody right now provides a better show. It's almost Manziel-esque, the level of performance and show that he could put on in a college football game. And that's exactly why I wanted to go watch him, because I want to know, is Cam Ward a legit prospect? I mean, he's a Heisman Trophy candidate. Is the arm strength, like, is he not playing in structure at Miami because there's nobody open, or because the offensive line stinks? So I want to go see him live in person and get the whole field view of what it was that Cam Ward is and is not doing. I wanted to get my eyes on him, right? And I don't think you get a good idea for somebody's arm strength when you're watching them on television. I think you got to see them in person to really get a good idea of what somebody's arm strength is or is not doing. And Cam Ward, right? The arm strength is something that you want to take a peek at. What I saw with Cam Ward kind of confirmed how I felt about Cam Ward for a while. This is a guy who does not play well in structure. And the reliance on making those highlight reel plays is something that makes me not want to draft him in the first round. There is no problem to me if you're a quarterback and you're comfortable making plays outside of structure. I don't think that's a bad thing, right? It's important that if things do break down, your quarterback can improvise and make things happen. The problem is when what's supposed to be an emergency function becomes the main function, right? Because with Cam Ward, it seems like he's only really successful when the play breaks down. So much so that he actively makes the play break down artificially in order to get it into a place where he's a bit more comfortable making plays. You can make a living off of that, which Cam Ward has successfully been able to do in college. You can't do that in the NFL. And that's the biggest problem with Cam Ward. Go ahead and watch him. Think about the fact that Miami's one of the best teams in the country. Miami has one of the best wide receivers in the country. He's Xavier Restrepo. Like, think about how good that Miami team is. And ask yourself, does it make sense that Cam Ward, like, the play's always breaking down offensively for him? Like, does it feel like a natural amount of times that happens? Again, Joe Burrow, he plays out of structure great, but it doesn't feel like he relies on it. You watch Cam Ward and you're like, damn, man, if this play don't break down, he don't know where to go with the ball. Like, it shouldn't be that the play breaks down every time you take a snap if your team's not terrible. Miami's not a terrible team. Why is it every time Cam Ward touched the ball, he has to scramble around back there for 35 minutes? There's something else there. And I don't think he's comfortable playing in structure. Keep in mind, right, the guys who have had success in the NFL and had tape similar to Cam Ward, we're talking about Josh Allen. We're talking about Jordan Love. We're talking about Patrick Mahomes. Those kind of guys. Those guys were like 21 coming out of college and at most started 2 seasons in college football. Cam Ward is a 5th-year senior, and he's played all 5 of those years. Started in all 5 of those seasons. He's not super old, but he'll be 23 when he enters his first camp. He's not playing like this because he's not experienced like a young Josh Allen was, or Pat Mahomes, or Jordan Love, right? Where those guys played that way because they were inexperienced. Cam Ward plays this way because that's how Cam Ward likes to play. That's usually the difference between if you become Josh Allen or Jameis Winston. If you become Jordan Love or Zach Wilson. I think that matters. And you look at Cam Ward, he cannot play in structure. He does not like playing in structure. He does not trust playing in structure. That's a problem. The talent is there. He has really probably the most talented arm of all of these prospects. But if he can't play in structure, that arm talent doesn't matter as much. Because the situations he's going to put himself to use that arm talent are going to be so much more difficult at the next level that it's not going to matter that he's that talented. he has to change up his whole game. Now, if I see Cam Ward for the rest of the season and he's playing in structure, he's being on time, my opinion is going to change drastically on Cam Ward. But if you're asking me right now, how do I feel about Cam Ward? I don't love it. Somebody just brought up, well, hey, man, Mel Kiper just thought that Pat Mahomes would be a bust. Again, Pat Mahomes way, way more talented than Cam Ward ever was. Pat Mahomes is so talented that he went, in the top 15 of the draft in his third year as a true junior. Cam Ward's a fifth-year senior. He could have been draft eligible for the last 2 years. He didn't go draft eligible because nobody would have drafted him that high because while he's talented, he ain't that talented. He ain't even Jordan Love level talented. He is a good arm talent, but other things, he doesn't have the Mahomes strength. He doesn't have the Jordan Love's arm strength either. So he's not uniquely talented as a thrower of the football. So he's not Pat Mahomes. And again, Pat Mahomes is 21 doing this shit. And he did it way better than Cam Ward was. Cam Ward is 23. Pat Mahomes had 2 seasons under his belt. Cam Ward's had 5. You would think he would have developed out of this stuff by now. But he hasn't. That's the issue with Cam. But let's keep the focus on the draft. Because that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the draft. Specifically, 4 prospects that I'm fascinated with. That doesn't mean that I love these prospects and I want to take them number 1 overall, but I find these 4 prospects to be fascinating. And I think that these 4 prospects will make or break the 2025 draft class. How these 4 prospects break out will either determine if this is a great draft class in 5 years or if this is a bad draft class in 5 years. I'll go down the list one by one. The first player I'm fascinated with is Shedeur Sanders. There's a lot of good things that fascinate me about Shedeur. There's a lot of bad things that fascinate me about Shedeur, even though my overall feeling on Shedeur is positive. I like Shedeur Sanders as a draft prospect. The reason I find him to be fascinating is he has been in the public eye of hardcore football fans for 8 years. He had the Overtime Elite show with Deion Sanders. And the prime, what they call it, prime high or prime high school, whatever it was, where his dad was coaching him. And then he makes the move to Jackson State, then makes the move to Colorado. And it feels like Shedeur Sanders is 28 or something because we have known him longer than we known some 28-year-olds playing in the NFL right now. But we've watched a ton of Shedeur. And to his credit, as somebody who went to games, he played it as a junior, not a junior, as a freshman and a sophomore at Jackson State. I've watched him play. He has made significant improvements in his game. He's much better than he was when he first came into college. When he first came into college, he looked like a 3-star playing in the FCS. Now he looks like a significantly improved player. I think he's done a great job of utilizing the tools that he has to get to where he can. I think he is maximizing his natural talent right now. The question with Shedeur Sanders is, 1, how much natural talent there is. Now, this is why he's fascinating. On one hand, he is a Sanders. His dad is Deion Sanders. And we'll talk about the other implications of that in just a minute. But his dad is Deion Sanders. So you would think that the ceiling on his athletic ability is insane because his father was one of the greatest athletes to ever grace a football field in his time. But that's the thing with Shedeur. I don't think he's a great athlete. I watch him run. I seen him get chased down by edge guys that I don't think are going to go to the league. And I think to myself, I don't think this dude's that fast. I see him throw the ball. And look, I'm impressed with the skill stuff with Shedeur Sanders. The work ethic of Shedeur Sanders is obvious, right? When you watch him throw a ball and layer it over a linebacker, that's skill. That's skill. That's a lot of work to be able to get that arc that perfect and to be able to throw with anticipation like he does. I don't have any doubt in my mind that Shedeur Sanders is one hell of a hard worker. It's not that stuff. It's the other stuff with Shedeur. It's like how much natural talent is there. Because while I think he's a really good, accurate thrower to football, the arm talent, right, his natural ability to just drive a football in without even needing much lead up with his base, it's not great. I don't know what Shedeur is going to throw on the radar gun. I don't know how far he's going to throw at his pro day. What I do know is when I watch him on TV and when I've seen him in person, the arm strength feels rather pedestrian. Now, he is Deion Sanders' son. It is possible that he develops whatever he needs to develop and he gets the natural ability up where it needs to be. But I think the interesting thing about Shedeur Sanders is despite being the son and the most notable son of one of the greatest athletes of all time, what makes Shedeur Sanders special? It's up here. It's all up here. Like athletically, I think if his name instead of Shedeur Sanders was Shedeur Jackson, we wouldn't really be checking for him as an athlete. We would be talking about him as a more cerebral player. But because his last name is Sanders, that makes you feel like he should be more athletic than he is or have a more athletic ceiling than he does. What I'm concerned about Shedeur going to the next level is not if he can process at an NFL level. I think he can do that. Not if he's smart enough to play quarterback at the next level. I think he's obviously smart enough to do that. My question with Shedeur is if he's athletic enough to make the transition successfully to the NFL. He has everything he needs up here. The physicality, I worry, is going to hold him back. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, and he's not fast. That is why I find Shedeur Sanders fascinating as a prospect on himself. Now let's roll into the other fascinating element of the Sanders family being involved with this decision. And look, a lot of this is going to be played up because most of the conversation about Shedeur Sanders as it comes to NFL draft is going to happen when nobody's playing football, and people going to talk about this because they need to talk about stuff. But the Sanders family is going to be involved in his decision-making. I don't think the Sanders family is going to pull a coup, right? They're not going to be able to force Shedeur Sanders to get selected by a certain team. They might highly encourage a team to take Shedeur Sanders, but they don't have the clout to say, we're not going to Cleveland. I don't think that's the case. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the case. I don't think that they could pull it. I know people go and say, hey, well, Archie Manning did this with Eli Manning. Well, one, the Manning family means something different than the Sanders family in NFL circles. And two, that's not really how that whole thing went down. Like the Chargers were ultimately okay with Eli preferring not to go there because they were fine with drafting Phillip Rivers anyway. Like if the Chargers weren't fine with drafting Phillip Rivers and had their heart set on Eli Manning, then they would have just drafted Eli Manning and the Mannings would have had to be mad about it. Like it would have got figured out. But Shedeur's not going to play baseball. He's not a baseball player. Shedeur's going to want to play football. Shedeur's going to go wherever anybody drafts him. Like that's the plain and simple of it. So I'm not here to really give credence to the whole, Sanders family is going to control where he goes and he would never let his son play in Cleveland. I don't think that's the case. I don't care about that whole element of it. The part where I find the Sanders family influence to be interesting is Deion Sanders and his use of the bully pulpit. For those of you who don't know what the bully pulpit is basically if you're in a position or you have a platform that most people don't, you can sway public opinion because of your standing with the public. Deion Sanders has an incredible sway in the public. And what I think is going to be interesting is Deion not going to be a threat to make sure that his son doesn't sign to your organization. I don't think that matters. I know Deion has said things on podcast to suggest that he will, but I'm just telling you right now, he does not have the facilities to pull that off. He's not that powerful. He's not going to tell NFL owners who's going to draft them, who's not, especially when Shedeur Sanders is not like a lock number 1 overall type prospect. That's just not going to happen. What could happen, though, is that Deion Sanders can definitely get your coach fired. Deion Sanders can definitely get your GM fired. Like that is real. And I know some people are going to push back on that. Oh, no, Deion's not going to get anybody fired. Yeah, he will. Think about this, man. Shedeur and Deion have been like this since high school. Deion has made a lot of decisions for that young man in college to get to Power 5, all of this. You think Deion going to stop now because he's a professional? No, Deion going to try to put his finger on the scale. Now, if Deion rocking with what your coach is doing, then he's going to be safe. But if he stop rocking with it, if you don't start taking his suggestions, then there's a good chance that Deion can get your coach fired. Unless he's like Mike Tomlin. But Mike Tomlin ain't drafting a quarterback this year. So that conversation does need to be had. If you are a franchise that is not on the most stable footing, but hoping to maintain stability, you really got to have a conversation about that element that you're adding in there. Like, I think that's what people underestimate, because too many people are focused on having this conversation exclusively with, will Deion let him draft him? That does not matter. Deion got no say on that. That's just wolf tickets. He can't do shit about if somebody drafts his son or not. What Deion can control, though, is the public opinion of the fan base of the team that selects him. That's what Deion can really have control over. And that's where Deion is dangerous. As far as like if you are GM or head coach, because he's not going to coach the team. And I know people are like, he's going to be busy coaching Colorado. He's going to find time for his kids. That's the one thing you got to give Deion Sanders a ton of credit for. He's been Deion Sanders this whole time. He's clearly found time for his kids, no matter what he's done. He's going to find time for his kid to pay attention to his son. He's not going to be so busy coaching Colorado, he ain't going to pay attention to what's happening with his child on Sunday. So, like, Deion not about to be absentee on this whole thing. Deion is definitely going to be in the building. Deion is definitely going to have a presence. Deion is definitely going to be a part of whatever you're doing there. And Deion is definitely going to be able to sway public opinion. That is what I think teams should look out for with Deion. I think we have our targets or the wrong parts of this. Because again, he's not going to stop a team from drafting his son. What he is going to do, though, he could get the coach fired, could get the GM fired. And that could be a good or bad thing. But it's probably not something you just want if you're drafting Shedeur, right? If you're looking at this from a general manager's point of view. So that's why I find Shedeur Sanders to be interesting. My next player that I find interesting is Travis Hunter. Because Travis Hunter, on one hand, is probably one of the most interesting and fascinating athletes we have seen enter the NFL draft in quite some time. but he's not going to be that same level of coveted when it comes to being a draft prospect. Because the most interesting thing about Travis Hunter ends the day he gets drafted. What makes Travis Hunter fascinating in college football and generational in college football is that he's a two-way player. Not just that he's a two-way player, that he is an elite two-way player to the likes of we haven't seen since Charles Woodson. He is a top 5 corner. He's a top 5 wide receiver. He's elite at both ends, a playmaker at both ends. He's the best wide receiver on Colorado's team. He's the best defensive back that Colorado has. But the thing is, when you draft Travis Hunter, all that ends because he's not going to play both positions in the NFL, obviously. He's having a hard time staying healthy. And I see a lot of people saying, hey, the health issues have to do with the fact that he's playing both positions. And I think that has something to do with it. But let's remember that Travis Hunter had a hard time staying healthy at Jackson State. Again, for those of you who paid attention to Deion at Jackson State, you wouldn't remember that he had a hard time staying healthy at Jackson State. I just don't think his body's built to withstand the punishment of the NFL. He's built like Nate Wiggins, who stays on the injury report. He's built like Denzel Ward, who stays on the injury report. I think whatever side you put him on, he's going to get injured or at least nicked up and stuff like that because his body has a hard time playing football at this high of a level, and he's only in the Big 12. And it's been happening his entire career, even when he was playing in the FCS. So what do you do with Travis Hunter as a draft prospect when the thing that makes him generational is the exact reason that is one of the things that goes away the second you draft him? What do you do with that? Do you treat him like a top corner in this draft? If we were only evaluating Travis Hunter as a corner, would he be the number 1 prospect in this draft class? It's hard to say. If he were a wide receiver, he wouldn't be the number 1 prospect in this draft class. I think what makes him exciting, what makes him unique, it's the exact thing that's not going to continue once you draft him. It's kind of like Reggie Bush. Y'all remember Reggie Bush? Makes me old to have to ask that question because Reggie Bush was a staple of my childhood. But Reggie Bush, he was seen as like he's going to be hands down number 1 overall pick, most dominant running back we've ever seen. But then he got to the league and you realize the second you drafted him, the thing that made Reggie Bush incredible didn't really exist in the NFL. And what you got was a dude who could return kicks at a high level. Like, is Travis Hunter, as an NFL prospect, going to have a similar transition that Reggie Bush had? That's the big question with him. That's what makes him fascinating to me. Third guy that I find fascinating, Jalen Milroe. I find Jalen Milroe and his stay at the University of Alabama to be so interesting. Jalen Milroe been at Alabama, 4 years? He's already graduated. He's in the middle of his 4th year, and he started as a graduate. So that would suggest to me that he graduated college in 3 years. Now, not a lot of prospects, especially prospects as young as Jalen Milroe, come out of college graduates. He's already graduated early. I like that. It's a very intangible thing, but I like that. Jalen Milroe also has improved significantly every year he's been at Alabama. I remember the first time I saw him, the second time I saw him, and the third time I saw him. Each year he looks completely different and he looks improved. He's also done that in spite of having 3 different offensive coordinators for every year that he started at Alabama. He had Bill O'Brien, who has admitted that he didn't even believe in Jalen Milroe when he got there. Tommy Rees the year after, where they went to the college football playoff, and right now he's playing in Caleb DeBoer's system. The whole time you've seen Jalen Milroe, all the improvement you've seen with Jalen Milroe, this has been done in a new offense every time. I think that matters. Like when I look at stuff, when you try to figure out why certain quarterbacks fell through the cracks, it's because they didn't put up the numbers that you were expecting them to put up. And then you find out little details like this. This is the stuff that pops up that nobody talks about. 3 offensive coordinators, 3 years. Kids learned 3 new offenses in 3 years and has still found a way to get better every year. I mean, you could just look at Jalen Milroe. You know the work ethic is insane. And then there's the athletic ability. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this. Jalen Milroe is the best athlete in this draft class. Y'all see him run past Georgia's defense? What about this week versus LSU? He ran through the LSU defense for the second time in his career. This is interesting stuff. Now, as a runner, he's also fascinating because you look at him, you hear the fact that he can run, and you hear me say stuff like he is the best athlete in his draft class. And you think he's like Lamar Jackson, but he's not like Lamar Jackson. He's like Derrick Henry, but plays quarterback. Like he just runs so fast, so quick. It's not Derrick Henry. Let me rephrase that. It reminds me of Ezekiel Elliott. Prime Ezekiel Elliott. That's what it reminds me of when he runs. Because Ezekiel Elliott didn't have the craziest wiggle in the world. He didn't like juke you a million times and get you with the feet like Lamar does. Like Jalen Milroe is not going to cross you over if you're a defensive back. But what Jalen Milroe has is he can go from 0 to 100 with his agility so quick in the same way that Zeke Elliott used to do at Ohio State. But he plays quarterback. And as a quarterback, he's gotten better every year. Now, is he where you want him to be as a passer? No. He has some clear levels of development to be there. But is he hopeless as a passer? Absolutely not. He is not a hopeless passer at the quarterback position. Mechanically, I think he needs to be a bit more refined. But I watch his work ethic. I look at the fact that he graduated college super early. I look at the fact that he's learned a new offense every year of his college career. And I think to myself, if that kid needs to learn new mechanics, I trust that kid to learn new mechanics. And that's the thing about projecting these guys. Yes, we got to look at them as athletes. Yes, we got to look at them as football players and what their production has been. But also, we got to look at them as human beings. Do you trust this human being to get better at football? Do you trust this human being to put the work in? Do you trust this human being to have the tenacity, right? We talked about Jedrick Wills lacking this. You can have all the physical ability you want. You can be as talented as you want at the quarterback position or at any position. But if you don't have the mental makeup here, the tenacity, the work ethic, the will to be great, then it ain't going to matter. And the one thing I get when I watch Jalen Milroe and when I listen to him talk and when I hear things about him off the field, that gives me the feeling of somebody who's going to be somebody. Like that dude, for whatever reason, feels like a leader. It's a very intangible thing. But I just trust that kid to put the work in, to get better, more than anybody else in this draft class, because I've seen him do it despite the circumstances being absolutely crazy for him. Think about it. That's what I like the most out of him. It's almost Jalen Hurts-like, where Jalen Hurts kind of got it easy, started as a freshman, but then stuff just started changing. Tua got put over him. He had to go to Oklahoma, but he figured it out. And that's when I thought, hey, man, there might be something to that Jalen Hurts guy, because he has showed that he has the mental ability to adjust and make the most out of whatever situation he's in. And that's something I see in Jalen Milroe. And that's not common. And then you add on top of his athletic ability, which obviously is not common. And you think, I get it. Shador's the more polished passer. But man, there's something about that Milroe guy that makes you trust him more. It's fascinating to me. It truly is. Last guy I got here, Ashton Jeanty. I am fascinated with him because I want to know, what's it going to take for Andrew Berry to draft the running back in the first round? There seems to be some positions that Andrew Berry is so allergic to. But to be fair to Andrew, when he has seen a talent at a certain level, he tends to ignore the fact that they play a position he doesn't value. The biggest example here is, I don't think you're going to have to make a strong argument with anybody that Andrew Berry does not love linebackers. He's not spent a ton of resources on linebackers. But he did trade up in the second round to get Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I wonder if Ashton Jeanty is a good enough running back prospect to Andrew Berry that he treats him like JOK, right? That he breaks his rules to bring him in. I think he is. This dude's incredible. Like, you guys seen the meme where Jeanty's like just standing up straight in the backfield? If we could get a picture of that up, that would be amazing. I understand it's very short notice, so if you can't, you can't. But this dude is amazing. Boise State is on their way to being the first, not the first, the second G5 school to make the college football playoff, the first in the 12-team playoff to qualify for the playoff. And they're doing this off the back of this dude running the football. He doesn't have a ton of miles on him. He's only played 2 seasons. He's super young. He could pass protect. He could receive out the backfield. This guy's the real deal. Puts up 200 yards like on a regular basis. This dude is the next running back in college football, right? Like the same way we were like, oh, Saquon Barkley, that dude's next up. This dude's next up. He is an incredible player. And I just wonder if this is going to be something where AB decides to break a rule to bring this guy in. Yeah, there it is. Him and Nick Chubb both stand up straight. Could you imagine like a 22 formation with both of them just standing up like this and you a linebacker having to deal with that? Oh, man, that'd be fun. That would be fun. All right. Let's talk about the Cavs real quick, man. You know, we're running out of time here. Let's talk about the Cavs. I am ecstatic with where the Cavs are. I find it to be an interesting conversation to have about the Cavs. But I am ecstatic with where they're at. I know this is the Orange and Brown Report, but we can talk about some Cavs here, right? Evan Mobley has made the leap that I think a lot of people were expecting Evan Mobley to make last year. He's making it right now. He's averaging 18 points a game. Darius Garland is back to looking like Darius Garland, and Donovan Mitchell looks like an absolute superstar. And I know some people were comparing this year's Cavs team to the Atlanta Hawks team, but the thing is that the Atlanta Hawks team did not have a legitimate MVP candidate superstar like the Cavs do right now in Donovan Mitchell. Like, that's what separates you from being an Atlanta Hawks type team. An Atlanta Hawks type team is a team that wins 60 games but doesn't have a guy to get the ball to at the end of the game. They definitely have a guy to get the ball to at the end of the game. There is absolutely no doubt about that when you watch this Cavs team. And they got 2 guys to get the ball to at the end of the game, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And now you have Evan Mobley, you have Jared Allen, and the Cavs are playing great basketball. But here's the reason I wanted to bring up the Cavs. And the reason I wanted to bring up the Cavs is to bring up where fans were on the Cavs just last offseason. A lot of people myself included at times, thought that Kobe Altman should be fired because he didn't make enough moves. Thought that this guy, the Cavs needed to just get rid of Darius Garland and tear this whole thing down. And basically, a lot of people were saying about last year's Cavs team what people are saying about this year's Browns team. But the Cavs made the right change in the right place. They didn't get rid of Donovan Mitchell. They extended him. They didn't even get rid of Karis LeVert. You see him in the background. They didn't even get rid of him. All they did was get Kenny Atkinson. Now, we knew the Cavs coaching need to be changed, right? JB Bickerstaff, his time had ran out with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It made sense at the time. But they only made the one sensible decision. They didn't overreact to everything else. They weren't overly reactionary because there are a lot of people telling you need to trade Donovan, you need to trade Darius Garland for this guy, or you should trade Donovan Mitchell at the trade deadline to get something back for him or something like that, right? Like a lot of people were giving you those panicky takes. All they did was run it back, fix the problem that they need to fix, and now look at them. 11-0, one of the best teams in basketball. Who would have thought it? This gives me the lesson in sports. You're never as good in pro sports as you think you are, right? You're one game away in pro sports to being humbled, no matter how good your team is. You're also never as bad as you think you are in pro sports. And right now, the Cleveland Browns are bad. Like they're 2-7. They're bad. But I don't think they're as bad as some people make it out to be in the comment section, that they're as ruined for the future as some people make to be in the chat. Right now, negativity is going to win the day because they're 2-7, and 2-7 is not a breeding ground for optimism. But that doesn't mean that those of us who don't want to be reactionary about this whole thing don't exist and aren't still paying attention. Yeah, the Browns are 2-7. Yeah, they have obvious problems they need to fix. But the Browns' JB Bickerstaff is the quarterback position. Let's not act like that's not the case. Yeah, is this team good enough to win a Super Bowl right now, even if they had better quarterback play? It's debatable, like, on how much better quarterback play they would need, right? If they had Lamar Jackson, this would be a Super Bowl caliber team. If they had Jalen Hurts, this will be a good team. But let's not act like we don't know what the main problem was at the beginning of the season for this Cleveland Browns team that led to them being this bad. The offensive line didn't help things. The wide receivers didn't help things, but it was the quarterback position. If you're looking for a JB Bickerstaff on the Cleveland Browns, it was Deshaun Watson. The question is, will the Browns do what they have to do to move on from their JB Bickerstaff and try to find their Kenny Atkinson? Because if they do, the Browns could change very little on this team. I swear to you, if they just get a better, let's say they draft, name quarterback that you want, and that guy works out, the Browns will be one of the better teams in football next year. Despite the fact that they stink right now. Because part of the reason they stink is because they don't have quarterback play. It's a big part. Offensive line could get better, but you have extra picks in the draft to do that. You have free agency to do that. But the offense, the issue is quarterback. That's what the Browns could do to get much better next year. Question is, are they going to be aggressive about doing that, or are they going to kind of sit on their hands and wait out this whole Deshaun Watson thing? I think it would be a mistake to not acknowledge that this Watson thing is a failure and just move on, right? I get why you hung on it for it up to this point. I honestly do. Even though I didn't like how long they hung on to it this season, I get why they've hung on to it to get to this point. The same way I understand why JB Bickerstaff got the extra year in Cleveland. You had to see it out. I mean, there was some promise in there. But now that we've seen this out the proper amount of time, we got to make that move. And that's what Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are going to be judged on. Are they going to make that move? Or are they going to change nothing, throw Deshaun Watson back out there, and give us the shock face when it doesn't work out again? Because that's the piece that needs to change. The dude doesn't have it anymore. You got to move on to a different quarterback and a different philosophy. We got any questions, Ian? What do I think of Emeka Egbuka? I don't get to watch a ton of Ohio State football, but from what I remember, he's a solid wide receiver prospect. I think he's going to be for teams that are drafting at the back end of the first round, not necessarily where the Browns are going to be drafting on. Yeah, anything else? Do you think DeJuan could be the long-term solution at left tackle? I think there's a solid chance that he could do that. I think there's a better than solid chance that he could do that. He's had a solid 2 games. He seems to be more motivated on the left side. And the most important part is he doesn't look clumsy, at least in pass blocking on the left side. Now, as a run blocker, he looks a little clumsy. But to be fair to DeJuan, he looks clumsy on the right side when he's run blocking too. So I think he has the potential to be equally as good on that left side as he is on the right side. He still has to develop as a run blocker, though. I think that's his biggest flaw. How'd that Bama game go last week? What are you even talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about. But that is Quincy Carrier live. And that is my thoughts about Jedrick Wills. That is my thoughts about revenge game Jameis, Cam Ward, the 4 prospects in this draft class that fascinate me, the Cleveland Cavaliers. If you didn't get to hear it all, make sure you check out the replay once that goes live. But now I think it's about the appropriate time to throw this to Barry and Fred so you guys can get their perspective on things coming out of the bye week. I want to thank everybody for watching. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.